All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend Rania Khalek. Rania is an independent journalist whose work has been seen at Truth Out, Salon, Al Jazeera, Electronic Intifada. She is the co-host, along with Kevin Gostola, of the podcast Unauthorized Disclosure, all of which and more you can find at raniakhalek.com. You can also follow her on Twitter at Rania Khalek. Rania, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, so Rania, most people have heard this by now, and it's certainly no surprise. Hillary Clinton recently announced that she is, in fact, running for president for 2016. A lot of people really talk. One of the reasons a lot of people are throwing their support for her so far, in kind of a disappointing way, is the fact that she's kind of coming out, because she's a woman, this is the truth, but they're saying she is the feminist candidate here. You actually wrote a piece a couple of months ago at Fair on Hillary Clinton and the Feminism of Exclusion. Tell us all about that.
Well, Hillary Clinton is trying to brand herself, like basically as the feminist candidate, which is a bit different than what she did in 2008. In 2008, she was, or 2008, I guess, whenever those elections were. She basically tried to distance herself from that. But now she's sort of embracing it because feminism, especially on the liberal end of the spectrum, is very popular. And so she's kind of going around like talking about how she's like this feminist woman, and her every policy decision she's made has been like oriented around families and children and women, and it's just not true. I mean, Hillary Clinton, her record says the exact opposite. She's been since her days as like first lady, she's advocated for policies that have been very, very destructive for women and children and families, and especially. I mean, she played like a pivotal role in helping shore up votes for her husband's welfare reform bill. And welfare reform, devastated families. Fewer families were fewer women, especially single mothers, specifically, and children were unable to like access federal money because of welfare reform. And it's just been absolutely devastating. And going on from there, it's like, more recently with her time serving as Secretary of State, she tried to say that her foreign policy like has been oriented around women and girls. And that's just not true at all. As a Secretary of State, she's a complete hawk on foreign policy. She was like instrumental to basically orchestrating, the bombing campaign in Libya, which has been absolutely devastating as well. Now we look at Libya now and we see what's happening there, and it's just like a mess of like it's basically just attracting, armed groups and jihadists from everywhere, and it's like this. There's this power vacuum there, and there's a lot of violence taking place. Not a great environment for women and girls. She's a strong advocate for drone strikes. Which is also not great for women and girls who are, targeted by them, whose families are targeted by them. Over the summer during, you might remember last summer when it was, the issue with children refugees coming like in the tens of thousands from Central America to the U.S., like fleeing violence. That was happening at the border, and it was getting a lot of attention. She wasn't Secretary of State anymore, but she commented she had very strong opinions on this, and she basically said, we need to deport these children to send a message to their parents that they shouldn't be sending their kids here. Those children, like a third of them, were fleeing violence in Honduras, which has increased dramatically since the coup in Honduras, the military coup in 2009. And Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State during that time. And she basically admits in her memoir that she played a role in making sure that the democratically elected president of Honduras could not return to power, helping to solidify the military coup regime that had taken over. And so, she played a role in making this place more violent. And then she came out and said, no, we need to send kids back to this violence. It's just really disgusting. And lastly, during when Gaza last summer was being bombed mercilessly by Israel, a bombing campaign that killed like over 500 children. After all that took place, she did an interview in The Atlantic with Jeffrey Goldberg, and she said that, Palestinians basically blamed them for their own deaths and said that they were stage managing the slaughter. And she backed Israel 100%. So this is the feminist that we're talking about. I mean, so that's why I call it a feminism of exclusion, because it seems to exclude all kinds of people, particularly those who are poor, who are like oppressed, and women who just don't have the same means as people like Hillary Clinton do.
And I think that's a really good point when it comes to the term feminism, and because sadly for a lot of people, when you say feminism, pretty much the only thing they really do think about, and this is wrong that they think about, is just abortion. And look, and that's important. Abortion and choice, those are not issues that are not important. And women's health and women's health access in America and across the world is an important issue. It is, but it's not the only thing, the only issue where feminism is involved. And so like when you talk about feminism, I think it's important to kind of look at overall, are her policies actually good for women and equality? And, especially, and again, you're right when you mentioned this, like she brags about in her book, brags about passing welfare reform, and welfare reform has done more to harm women in America, that Clinton welfare reform, than a lot of things that have been passed. That devastated a lot of poor people, mainly women and like single mothers. That had devastating effects on them.
Exactly. And it's, again, I mean, if we're going to call her a feminist, then we need to be honest about what we mean by feminism in the kinds of, in Hillary Clinton's kind of feminism, at least. And that's the sort of lean-in feminism, where it's like everything is about these sort of, I don't want to call abortion a superficial issue. It's like on the, it's not. It's like on the liberal end, it's like when it comes to liberal and Democratic candidates, I mean, that's to be expected that you're going to support a woman's right to choose. And again, and feminism goes far, far deeper than that. It's like, we're also talking about access to jobs, access to education, and access to healthcare. And when you're in support of very corporate policies, like Hillary Clinton is, when you're in support of the kind of neoliberal economics that Hillary Clinton is in support of, then, people aren't going to even be able to access abortion services because they're not going to have the money to. And so it goes much, much deeper than that. And, when it comes to like Hillary Clinton, and I think a lot of it also has to do with identity politics, right? Like Hillary Clinton's a woman. And for a lot of people, that's important, like having a first woman president. And I get that. That'd be cool.
And I think I get it too. And I want to say that's not unsubstantial either. Like, breaking that ceiling is not something that is something actually important to do and ridiculous that we haven't done. But again, it's time to we have to look at the big picture. I don't think we should belittle that, but there's a lot going on here.
It's a very superficial, it's like saying, well, Barack Obama was president, so now racism is fixed. It's like, well, if Hillary Clinton becomes president, sexism is going to go away. And it's just not true. It's like, I mean, it'd be nice to have a woman president, sure, but it's like, well, what kind of woman president? I mean, I don't want like a Margaret Thatcher. Like, that's not, how is that good for women? That's where so that's another issue too, is like this identity politics of like just supporting her because she's a woman. And I think that's kind of, what's happened in the past too. It's like, well, just like it's not criticizing any criticism of Obama from the left is racism, and we have to support him because it's good for everybody. It's all good for all people of color. Well, you know what? Like, we have to look at people's policies too. And when it comes to Hillary Clinton, like her policies are very anti-women.